Have you ever wondered what you would do if the one person you trusted most in the world tried to erase you, not just from their life, but from existence itself? What does a father do when his only son, the boy he raised, the man he built an empire for, decides he would be better off dead? My name is James Dubois, and I had to answer that question. My answer came in the form of an arrest warrant, 3 phone calls, and a revenge so complete it would become a legend in the city of Atlanta. It all started 3 months ago when my heart decided to give up on me. While I was fighting for every breath in a cold, sterile ICU room, my son Marcus was busy executing the ultimate betrayal. He sold my $2.3 million beach house, the one I built with my own hands, the one where his mother took her last breath. He liquidated my vintage car collection worth $809. He did all this by forging my signature on legal documents, a cruel imitation of the hand that once fed him. He thought he was being clever, securing his inheritance a little early. But he made one fatal mistake, a mistake born from a lifetime of arrogance and underestimation. He had no idea that Coastal Realty Group, the prestigious firm handling his brilliant and fraudulent sales, belonged to me. Every agent, every lawyer, every dollar that passed through their accounts ultimately reported back to the old man he thought was fading away in a hospital bed. Now I sit in my office, the Atlanta skyline sprawling before me, a single document on my mahogany desk. The pen feels heavy in my hand. It's not just ink and paper. It's the final chapter of the life I knew, and the first chapter of a lesson my son will never forget. My signature is sharp, decisive, just like every business deal I have ever closed. The name James Dubois is not just a name. It is a promise of power, and a warning of what happens when that power is challenged by your own blood. My phone buzzes. It is Denise Washington, my attorney, my general in this war. Her voice is calm, controlled, the sound of impending doom for my enemies. "Everything is in place, JD," she says. "The police are on standby. They move on your signal." I look out at the city I helped build, the lights twinkling like 1,000 tiny fuses. A smile touches my lips, but it holds no warmth. "Just wait, Denise." I reply, my voice a low rumble of anticipation. This is not a quiet affair. This is theater, and the final act needs a grand, unforgettable finale. Marcus wanted my legacy. Now he is about to become a part of it, just not in the way he ever imagined. What happened? It shattered a family, exposed a lifetime of lies, and served as a cold public execution of the man my son pretended to be. I did not raise my voice. I did not make a scene. I simply made 3 phone calls that systematically dismantled his entire world. Those calls were the culmination of a plan forged in the fires of the deepest betrayal a man can know. They were my answer to his greed, my final word in a conversation he thought he had already won. But to understand how my own son could believe he could get away with stealing my life's work, to truly grasp the coldness in his heart, I have to take you back to the day my heart stopped beating. January 15th. 6:23 in the morning. I remember the exact time because the antique clock in my kitchen, the one my late wife Eleanor bought for our first anniversary, had just chimed. I was pouring my morning coffee, the rich aroma filling the air, thinking about the day ahead. And then it hit me. A searing pain ripped through my chest like a lightning strike, stealing my breath and buckling my knees. It was a pressure so immense, so crushing, I felt like the whole world was collapsing on top of me. My coffee mug shattered on the floor, and as the darkness closed in, my last conscious thought was of Eleanor. The next thing I remember was a slow return to consciousness, a gradual awareness of sounds and sensations, the steady rhythmic beeping of a machine, the sterile smell of antiseptic, the soft, scratchy feel of hospital sheets. I blinked my eyes open, the bright fluorescent lights of the ceiling momentarily blinding me. I was in the Emory Medical Center Cardiac ICU Bed 7. Tubes and wires seemed to sprout from my body like vines, connecting me to a symphony of monitors that tracked every fragile beat of my heart. And sitting beside me, hunched over in a chair, was Marcus. His eyes were red-rimmed and puffy as if he had been crying for hours. When he saw I was awake, a wave of what looked like pure relief washed over his face. "Dad, thank God you're awake," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he rushed to my side. He grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly tight. "The doctors, they weren't sure you were going to make it." The concern in his voice felt so real, so genuine, that it soothed the fear coiling in my gut. A few hours later, Dr. Charles Wright, my cardiologist, came in to explain what had happened. He was a tall man with a calm, reassuring demeanor, but his words were anything but. "Mr. Dubois," he began, "you've suffered a massive heart attack. The damage is significant. We're going to need to perform a triple bypass surgery as soon as you are stable enough." As he spoke, I watched Marcus, who was standing just behind the doctor's shoulder. He nodded gravely at every word, his face a perfect mask of worried devotion. He squeezed my hand again, a gesture of solidarity of a son promising to stand by his father through the storm. In that moment, weak and vulnerable, surrounded by the cold mechanics of modern medicine, all I saw was a loving son terrified of losing his father. I saw the legacy of my love for him and Eleanor reflected in his eyes. I did not see the predator. I did not see the monster waiting in the wings, patiently biding his time until he could pick the bones of the life I had built clean. The first few days after the surgery were a hazy, disorienting blur. My world shrank to the four walls of that hospital room, a world governed by the beeping of monitors and the constant dull ache in my chest. Time was measured not in hours but in doses of medication and the brief, fragmented conversations I could manage before exhaustion pulled me back under. Through this fog, I heard words floating around me like ghosts. Words like prognosis, recovery, and the one that seemed to hang in the air, the heaviest costs. In this state of utter helplessness, Marcus was my anchor. He was the only constant, the only clear voice in the chaos. He handled everything. He spoke with the doctors, his voice firm and inquisitive. He charmed the nurses, ensuring I received the best possible attention. From my bed, I watched him orchestrate my care with an efficiency and grace that filled me with a weary pride. He was the perfect son, a pillar of strength when I had none. He was my boy, all grown up, taking charge just as I had always taught him to. One afternoon, a few days after the operation, I was drifting in that twilight state between sleep and wakefulness. The door to my room was slightly ajar, and I could hear voices in the hallway. It was Marcus and Dr. Wright. I lay still, listening, not wanting to interrupt their important discussion. Marcus's voice was low, but it carried a carefully crafted tone of urgent concern. It was a performance, and I now realize I was its most important audience. "Doctor," he began, his voice laced with manufactured anxiety. "We need to talk about the expenses. I know this isn't the time, but I have to be prepared. My father, he's a proud man, but his insurance isn't the best. It won't cover nearly enough of this. I need to know what we're looking at. I need a number, a real number, so I can start making arrangements." His words painted a picture of a son wrestling with the grim practicalities of a crisis, a son forced to think about money, when all he wanted to think about was his father's life. There was a pause, and then Dr. Wright responded, his voice professional yet tinged with a sympathy that Marcus had expertly elicited. He was a good man, a brilliant doctor, but he was no match for the cunning of my son, a predator wearing the mask of filial piety. "Mr. Dubois," the doctor said kindly, "the cost will be substantial. The surgery itself, the extended stay in the ICU, the round-the-clock monitoring, and then the months of rehabilitation. It will certainly run well into 6 figures. But right now, our only focus, our only priority should be on your father's recovery. We can deal with the finances later." Then came the masterstroke, the part of the act that sealed my fate. Marcus let out a long theatrical sigh. It was a sound heavy with the feigned weight of the world, a sigh loud enough to carry through the open door and right to my bedside. It was the sound of a dutiful son grappling with an impossible burden. "I understand, doctor," Marcus said, his voice now a near whisper of strained resolve. "Of course his health is all that matters. It's just, I want to ensure he has everything he needs. I read about an experimental physical therapy program in Germany. I read about private nurses who specialize in post-cardiac care. He's going to get the absolute best, the best specialist, the best of everything. I don't care what it costs. I will sell everything I have if I have to. I will mortgage my future. I will do whatever it takes to save him." Lying there in that hospital bed, a web of tubes and wires tethering me to life, I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the medication. It was pride. A deep, profound pride in the man my son had become. The boy Eleanor and I had raised, the child we had poured all our love and hopes into, was now a man of honor and responsibility. He was ready to sacrifice everything for his old man. He was shouldering a burden that should have been mine, and he was doing it with courage and love. In that moment, I had never felt more certain of my son's character. I had never been more wrong. I was witnessing the greatest performance of his life, and I gave him a standing ovation in my heart, completely oblivious to the fact that I was not his beloved father, but simply the star of his cruel and elaborate play. The applause in my soul was the sound of his final victory over my trust, a silent betrayal that was more devastating than any physical blow. A week after the surgery, the fog in my mind finally began to lift. The heavy shroud of anesthesia and painkillers receded, replaced by a sharp, constant pain in my chest, and the weary clarity of a man who had stared into the abyss and been pulled back. I was still weak, still tethered to a web of tubes and monitors, but I was lucid. I could follow conversations, I could feel the scratch of the hospital sheets against my skin, and most of all, I could feel a desperate longing for the comfort of my own home. It was in this state of fragile awareness that Marcus chose to make his move. He walked into the room one afternoon, not with the easy gait of a son visiting his recovering father, but with the purposeful stride of a businessman approaching a critical negotiation. He carried a thick leather portfolio under his arm, and his face was a carefully constructed mask of solemn gravity. He looked tired, but it was the performative exhaustion of a martyr, not the genuine weariness of a caregiver. He pulled a chair close to my bed, the scrape of its legs on the linoleum floor, sounding unnervingly loud in the quiet room. "Dad," he began, his voice a low, somber tone he must have rehearsed. "I hate to bother you with this while you're still recovering, I truly do. But we have to be realistic about the situation." He opened the portfolio on his lap, and the air in the room seemed to grow heavier. "The medical bills they're staggering. I've been meeting with the hospital's billing department." He pulled out a sheaf of papers. They were covered in official-looking letterheads from Emory Medical Center, dense with columns of figures and medical jargon that made my head spin. Each number was a hammer blow, a stark reminder not just of my mortality, but of my vulnerability. The bypass surgery alone was over $175,000, he said, tapping a line item with his finger. The ICU is charging nearly $10,000 a day. Then there are the surgeon's fees, the anesthesiologist, the endless consultations, the medication. Dad, we're already north of $250,000, and Dr. Wright says you'll need at least another month of care here, followed by intensive rehabilitation. He let the numbers hang in the air, a cloud of financial dread. At the time, I had no reason to doubt them. Why would who would be so monstrous as to forge the medical bills of their own dying father? I now know those documents were fictions, masterpieces of deceit printed in his own office. The figures wildly inflated to create a sense of overwhelming panic. "I met with your financial advisor yesterday," he continued, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "I laid everything out for him. He was very clear. He said, 'Your father built an incredible portfolio, Marcus, but it's not liquid. In a medical crisis of this magnitude, liquidity is everything.' He said we need to be proactive, not reactive. We can't let this hospital drain everything you've worked your entire life to build." It was all so logical, so persuasive. He was using the very principles of financial prudence that I had taught him, twisting them into weapons against me. "A way to ensure you get the absolute best care without bankrupting your estate." He paused, looking me directly in the eye, the perfect picture of a responsible son. "He thinks we should liquidate a few of the non-essential assets, the beach house in Savannah. Dad, you barely go there more than a few weeks a year. It's beautiful, but it's just sitting there. Its value could be working for you right now, paying for your recovery. And the car collection, they're magnificent, but they're just metal and paint collecting dust in a garage. Their only real job is to appreciate in value, and now is the time to capitalize on that." He saw the flicker of pain in my eyes when he mentioned the beach house, the sanctuary Eleanor and I had built together. He moved in quickly to soothe it. "I know how much Mom loved that house. I love it too. But I think she would agree. Your life is infinitely more valuable than any piece of property. We can use the money to cover all the bills, and the rest, the surplus, we can move into a much safer, more stable investment fund. A fund that will generate income for you for the rest of your years without any of the risks of real estate or collectibles." I was so tired. The pain in my chest was a constant grinding presence. The thought of arguing, of analyzing financial statements, of fighting was more than I could bear. He was offering me a simple solution, an escape from the terrifying numbers and the crushing responsibility. He was offering to take the wheel. And wasn't that what I had always wanted? For him to become a man who could take charge, who could lead. The pride I had felt a few days earlier swelled within me again, blinding me to the red flags my instincts should have been screaming about. He was my son, my only son. "Do what you think is best, Marcus." I finally whispered the words, feeling like a surrender. "I trust you." A slow smile of triumph, so subtle I almost missed it, touched his lips before being replaced by a look of solemn relief. "I won't let you down, Dad," he said, his voice thick with false emotion. He reached out and took my hand in his. His hand was warm and strong, completely enveloping my own. But as he squeezed, it didn't feel like the gentle, reassuring touch of a loving son. It felt different. It felt firm, possessive, like the grip of a new owner closing a deal. It was the grip of a predator that has finally sunk its teeth into its prey. At the time, in my medicated haze, I mistook it for strength and comfort. I know now what it truly was. It was the feeling of my own power being signed away, the cold final click of a lock snapping shut on the life I once knew. 2 long months after my heart betrayed me, the doctors finally declared me stable enough to go home. I was discharged from the hospital on a bright, cool spring morning. The Atlanta air, fresh with the scent of pine and blooming dogwood, felt like a miracle in my lungs after months of breathing recycled antiseptic air. But I was a shadow of my former self, thinner, weaker, with a deep, angry scar hidden beneath my shirt as a constant reminder of my fragility. Yet I was alive, and in those first few hours of freedom, that was all that mattered. Marcus drove me home from the hospital, his chatter filling the quiet interior of the car. He talked about business, about the weather, about his fiancée Isabella's wedding plans. It was all a smooth, polished monologue designed to project an image of normalcy, to lull me back into a comfortable state of ignorance. I nodded along, too tired to engage my mind focused on one single solitary desire. The first thing I wanted to do, the only thing I truly craved, was to escape to our beach house in Savannah. I needed to stand on the porch and I needed to feel the sun on my face and hear the crash of the waves. It was my sanctuary, the place where the memories of Eleanor were most vivid, where I could still hear her laughter and the whisper of the wind through the sea oats. It was a place for healing. As we pulled into the driveway of my Atlanta home, I turned to him. "Marcus," I said, my voice still raspy from disuse. "I don't want to stay here tonight. Take me to Savannah. I need to be by the ocean." A flicker of something I couldn't quite identify. Something like panic flashed across his eyes before being instantly masked. He put on a warm, indulgent smile. "Dad, that's a great idea. But not just yet," he said quickly. "The house is actually under renovation right now. I hired the best contractors in Savannah to upgrade it for you. It's a surprise. I'm redoing the entire deck, expanding the kitchen window. I wanted it to be absolutely perfect for when you were fully recovered." The lie was so smooth, so detailed, so thoughtful. It should have reassured me. Instead, a cold dread began to seep into my bones. I am not a fool. I built an empire by reading people, by sensing the subtle shifts in tone and the flicker of deceit in their eyes. And in that moment, my son was lying to me. I knew it as surely as I knew my own name, but I played along. I was too weak for a confrontation, and a lifetime of strategy taught me that you never attack until you have all the facts. So I smiled a weary smile. "A surprise. That's very thoughtful of you, son. I look forward to seeing it." He helped me inside, got me settled in my favorite armchair, and fussed over me like a mother hen before finally leaving, promising to return with dinner. The moment the front door clicked shut, the fragile old man disappeared. I pushed myself out of the chair, my muscles screaming in protest, and walked with a slow, deliberate pace to my office. This room was my fortress, the command center of my life. I sank into the familiar embrace of my leather chair, the scent of old books and success filling my senses. For the first time since my heart attack, I felt a flicker of my old self returning. Without a moment's hesitation, I began to act. My first call was to my private banker at SunTrust, a man named George that I had known for 20 years. "George, it's JD. Dubois," I said. "It's good to be home. I need you to do me a favor. Can you give me a quick rundown of the recent activity in my primary accounts?" There was a telling silence on the other end of the line, a hesitation that spoke volumes. "James," he finally said, his voice carefully neutral. It's wonderful to hear your voice. There have been some significant liquidations over the past 6 weeks, authorized by Marcus under the power of attorney you signed at the hospital. He proceeded to list the transactions, the dates, the staggering numbers. A river of my life's work rerouted and drained away. The beach house, the cars, everything. My hand was shaking as I hung up the phone. The room felt cold, the air thin. But I wasn't done. I needed to hear it all. I dialed my collection manager, a good man named Bill, who loved my vintage cars as if they were his own. I kept my voice casual, friendly. "Bill, my friend, how are you?" I asked. "Listen, I'm finally home and I'm thinking a short drive might do me some good. Could you get the '67 Mustang ready for me this afternoon?" Another silence. This one filled with confusion and horror. Mr. Dubois' Bill stammered, I don't understand. I'm so sorry, but Marcus, he said you had approved it, that you needed the capital for medical expenses. He had all the paperwork, JD. It all looked perfectly legitimate. I had no idea. I don't remember saying goodbye. I simply lowered the phone back into its cradle. I sat there in the profound silence of my office, the heart of my empire, and felt the true meaning of ruin. The sharp physical pain from my surgery was a dull, distant throb compared to this. This was a new kind of pain, a spiritual agony that hollowed me out from the inside. The scar on my chest was a wound that would heal, a testament to a battle my body had won. But this wound, this invisible one carved by my own son, was a jagged tear through my very soul. It was the absolute crushing agony of betrayal. And in that moment, the grief was so profound, it felt like a second heart attack. But as the minutes ticked by, it became a cold, clear, and unshakable resolve. The victim who had left the hospital that morning was gone. In his place sat a predator, a king whose throne had been usurped and who would now stop at nothing to reclaim it. The moment I hung up the phone with Bill, the fog of grief that had enveloped me evaporated, replaced by the cold, sharp clarity of absolute certainty. The pain was still there, a white-hot core of agony in my soul, but it was no longer paralyzing. It was fuel. I picked up the phone again, my hand steady, my purpose clear. I dialed the number I knew by heart, the one that connected me to the only person on earth besides myself who I trusted implicitly. The phone rang only once. Denise Washington. Her voice was crisp, efficient, even at this late hour. "Denise, it's JD. I said, my own voice sounding foreign to my ears, hard and emotionless. "I need you at the house. Now. Something big has happened." There was no hesitation, no questions. Just a calm, immediate, "I'm on my way." That was Denise. For over 20 years, she had not just been my lawyer. She had been my consigliere, my strategist, and my friend. She had helped me build my empire, and she knew its every secret, its every strength, and its every vulnerability. Less than an hour later, she was walking into my office, her presence filling the room with an aura of competence and controlled power. She took one look at my face, and the professional mask she wore for the world softened for a fraction of a second, replaced by genuine concern. "JD, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse, Denise," I said, gesturing for her to sit in the chair opposite my desk. "I've seen a monster that I raised myself." We sat there in the quiet sanctuary of my office, the room where I had made deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and I laid it all out for her. I told her everything. The hospital, the expertly feigned concern, the fabricated story of mounting medical bills, the betrayal sealed with a handshake. I told her about the phone calls to the bank and to my car collection manager. As I spoke, I watched her face. The initial concern hardened into a cold, diamond, hard anger that settled deep in her eyes. When I finished, she didn't offer condolences or express shock. She wasn't surprised at all. "JD, I've suspected that kid's ambition would curdle into something ugly for years," she said, her voice a low, dangerous growl. "I never said anything because he was your son, your blind spot. But I always saw the greed in his eyes. He has none of your honor and all of your hunger. It's a toxic combination. Just tell me what you need. Let me dig into this." "I need the truth, Denise," I said. "I need every piece of paper, every transaction, every lie. I need the ammunition for the war he just started." "Consider it done," she said, pulling out her phone. Denise was not just a lawyer. She was a shark, the most feared corporate attorney in Atlanta. And for the next 48 hours, I unleashed her. From my office, I watched her work. She was a whirlwind of focused fury, making rapid-fire calls to her team, dispatching forensic accountants, and filing emergency legal requests. She moved with a speed and precision that was breathtaking, cutting through bureaucratic red tape like it was tissue paper. She was unearthing the digital and paper trail of my son's deceit, and she was doing it with a ruthless efficiency that was both terrifying and beautiful to watch. Exactly 48 hours after our meeting, she walked back into my office. She didn't say a word. She simply placed a stack of binders nearly a foot high on my desk. "Here it is, JD," she said quietly. The sales contracts for the beach house processed through a shell corporation that was a subsidiary of my own Coastal Realty Group. The vehicle sale documents with my signature expertly but not perfectly forged. The bank transfers, the new investment accounts opened in his name, but she had saved the worst for last. "There's one more thing," she said, opening her laptop and turning it to face me. "Marcus got sloppy. He got arrogant. He used your office one afternoon when he thought the house was empty. He forgot that after the break-in a few years ago, I had a state-of-the-art security system installed. The cameras are hidden, and they are always on." She pressed play, and I watched my world unravel in high definition. The screen showed my office, my sanctuary. Marcus walked in not like a visitor, but like a new king surveying his conquered territory. He sat down in my chair, and put his feet up on my desk. Then he pulled out a piece of my personal stationery and a stack of legal documents. For nearly 10 minutes, the camera recorded him as he practiced my signature over and over again, comparing his forgeries to a legitimate document he had brought with him. When he was finally satisfied, he calmly and methodically signed away my life's work, a small, smug smile playing on his lips. I watched without breathing, a silent scream trapped in my chest. "The bastard!" Denise whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "He's not just stealing your money, JD. He's trying to erase you. He's trying to step into your shoes while you're still alive to watch." I finally looked away from the screen. The image of my son's triumphant smile burned into my memory forever. The part of me that was a father, the soft, forgiving part that had loved that boy unconditionally, died watching that video. In its place, something cold and "He won't succeed," I said, my voice so cold it barely sounded human. "He made the mistake of starting a war with the man who taught him everything he knows about fighting. And it's a war he cannot possibly win." The engagement party for Marcus Dubois and Isabella Vance was exactly the kind of event my son had always dreamed of. It was held at the Piedmont Country Club, a bastion of old money and whispered power in the heart of Atlanta. The air itself seemed different there, thick with the scent of money, blooming magnolias, and a self-satisfied entitlement that had been passed down through generations. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto polished marble floors. A string quartet played softly in the corner, and waiters in crisp white jackets moved silently through the crowd, offering champagne and exquisitely crafted hors d'oeuvres. It was a monument to wealth, a carefully staged performance of elegance and class. And my son was the star of the show. From the updates I was receiving from one of Denise's private investigators posing as a waiter, I could picture the scene perfectly. The Vance family, whose fortune was so old it was practically an artifact, stood near the grand entrance. Mr. and Mrs. Vance greeted their guests with practiced smiles, their pride in their future son-in-law on full display. I could almost hear Arthur Vance boasting to his friends, his voice a low, confident baritone. "Marcus is a true prodigy," he would say, clapping a fellow guest on the shoulder. "A brilliant investor. He's doing remarkable things with his family's portfolio, a real chip off the old block." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. They saw Marcus as a merger, a bridge between their established legacy and what they believed was my vast self-made fortune. They had no idea they were about. He stood in the center of the main ballroom, dressed in a custom Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. He held a flute of champagne, not drinking it, but using it as a prop in his grand performance. He looked like a king holding court, every inch the master of his universe. He moved through the crowd with an easy confidence, his smile dazzling, his handshake firm. He was captivating, telling stories that made powerful men laugh and elegant women lean in closer. He was selling them the illusion of himself, and they were all buying it. He had no idea that his kingdom was a house of cards built on a foundation of lies, and that a hurricane was just minutes away from making landfall. Meanwhile, I was sitting in a black town car parked a block away from the country club, watching the minutes tick by on the dashboard clock. I had, of course, declined the invitation. "My health, you understand," I had told Marcus on the phone. "I'm just not strong enough for a party like that, son. But my heart will be with you." The lie had tasted like ash in my mouth, but it was a necessary part of the plan. His guard had to be completely down. He needed to feel untouchable to be standing at the absolute peak of his arrogance when I arrived to push him off the ledge. I was not nervous. The man who had trembled in a hospital bed was gone. The father who had wept in the silence of his office was gone. In their place was a man forged from betrayal, his heart encased in ice. I felt a profound, almost serene calmness. This was not an act of passion or rage. This was a strategic move, a carefully calculated demolition. Marcus had always craved this world, this acceptance from the city's elite. He had been so desperate to prove he was more than just the son of a builder that he had stolen, lied, and tried to erase his own father. Tonight I would give him exactly what he deserved. I would not just expose him. I would annihilate the very illusion he had worked so hard to create right in front of the audience, whose approval he valued more than anything in the world, more than family, more than honor, more than me. The clock struck 9. It was time for the curtain to rise. The clock on my dashboard read 9 o'clock precisely. Showtime. I stepped out of the car, my movements deliberate and steady. The night air was cool, but I felt a fire burning in my veins. I walked the short block to the country club's grand entrance, my simple dark suit a stark contrast to the glittering gowns and tuxedos of the guests still arriving. I didn't enter through the side. I walked straight up the main steps, a ghost returning to haunt a feast. Just as I reached the towering oak doors to the ballroom, they were opened from the inside by a doorman, and at that exact moment the gentle murmur of the party and the soft melody of the string quartet died down. Arthur Vance had just stepped onto the small elevated stage at the far end of the room, tapping a glass with a spoon to call for attention. My entrance could not have been more perfectly timed. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum, a void, created by the sudden shocking appearance of a man everyone believed to be bedridden, a man who was supposed to be a footnote in his son's glorious story. 200 pairs of eyes, the collective gaze of Atlanta's high society, turned to me as one. I saw it all in that one suspended moment. I saw the confused whispers, the polite smiles freezing and cracking on carefully made-up faces. I saw Arthur Vance pausing mid-tap, his hand frozen in the air. I saw his wife Eleanor Vance place a hand on her pearl necklace, her eyes wide with disbelief. And then I saw my son. Marcus was standing near the stage, basking in the spotlight of his future father-in-law's introduction. When he saw me, the color drained from his face as if a plug had been pulled. The confident, charming smile that he wore like a second skin dissolved, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of pure, unadulterated shock. The champagne flute in his hand tilted, a few drops of expensive liquid spilling onto the pristine white tablecloth below. His mind, which had been so quick and clever in its deceit, was now struggling to process the impossible. His carefully constructed world had just been hit by an asteroid, and he was standing at ground zero. I began to walk forward, my steps measured and unhurried. The sea of guests parted before me as if I were a prophet, or perhaps the Grim Reaper himself. The only sound in the cavernous room was the soft, rhythmic tap of my leather shoes on the marble floor. With every step I felt stronger, the weakness that had plagued my body for months burning away in the heat of my cold, righteous. Marcus finally broke from his paralysis, his survival instincts kicking in. He started towards me, attempting to intercept me before I reached the center of the room. He forced a wobbly, unconvincing smile onto his face, a desperate attempt to control the narrative that was slipping through his fingers. "Dad," he said, his voice a strained whisper that still managed to carry in the dead silence. "What are you doing here? I thought you were..." "The doctor said you needed to rest." I stopped just a few feet from him. I didn't whisper. I let my voice ring out cold and clear for every single person in that room to hear. "You thought I was in a hospital bed waiting to die?" I asked, my eyes locked on his. "You were hoping for that, weren't you, son? It would have made everything so much tidier." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. This was no longer a party. It was a public spectacle. The air crackled with tension. He looked around frantically, seeing the shocked and curious faces of his guests of Isabella's family. He had to shut this down. He moved closer, reaching for my arm, his voice dropping to a harsh, pleading hiss meant only for me. "Dad, stop it. You're tired. You're confused. Let me take you home right now." His touch was an attempt to reassert control, to physically remove the problem, to manhandle his old father out of sight and out of mind. I jerked my arm away from his grasp with a speed and strength that shocked both him and myself. "Don't you ever touch me again." I snarled, my voice low and venomous. "You lost that right the moment you decided my life was worth less than a beach house." His face crumpled, a mixture of fear and rage. He was trapped. He had nowhere to run. Leaving him standing there exposed and humiliated, I continued my slow walk to the stage. I walked past Isabella, who was staring at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. I walked past her parents, whose expressions had shifted from confusion to cold, hostile suspicion. I finally reached the stage and stepped up beside a completely dumbfounded Arthur Vance. He looked at me as if I were an apparition, his mouth slightly agape. Without asking for permission, I gently took the microphone from his limp hand. The transfer of power was complete. I turned to face the crowd, my crowd now. I took a deep breath and scanned the 200 stunned faces, all of them waiting hungry for the next chapter of this unexpected drama. My gaze finally settled on my son, who stood frozen in the middle of the room like a statue of failure. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice calm and steady, amplified by the microphone to fill every corner of the ballroom. "My apologies to Arthur for interrupting. Please forgive the intrusion. My name is James Dubois, and I have a short story I would like to tell you all. It's a story about ambition, loyalty, and betrayal. It's the story of my son." I let the silence in the ballroom stretch, allowing the weight of 200 pairs of eyes to press down on my son. I saw him swallow hard, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. He was a cornered animal, and he was about to find out that the hunter had no intention of showing mercy. "My son Marcus," I began, my voice resonating through the speakers, calm and conversational. "He is a wonderful storyteller, a truly gifted narrator. For months he has told you all a captivating story. A story of a brilliant young investor, a devoted son stepping up to manage his family's fortune while his old father recovers. It's a good story. It's inspiring. It has everything: ambition, family, loyalty, success. The only problem—" I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the room before landing back on him, "is that every single word of it is—" I saw Marcus open his mouth to protest, to begin a defense, but I gave him no opportunity. I slowly pulled my phone from my inside pocket. It felt impossibly heavy, a small black rectangle that held the power to detonate a life. I made my first call. It was answered on the first ring. "Start it now," I said quietly, and hung up. Behind me, the enormous projection screen that had been displaying a romantic slideshow of Marcus and Isabella smiling in exotic locations flickered and went black. The sudden darkness commanded the absolute attention of everyone in the room. For 3 long seconds, there was only blackness and silence. And then an image appeared. It was my office. My sanctuary. The picture was crystal clear, the quality of a Hollywood movie. And there was my son sitting in my chair. He looked casual, arrogant, as he swirled a glass of my best scotch. He put his feet up on my desk, a desk I had built $100 million empire from, a desk he had never earned the right to sit at. The room was utterly silent as they watched him pull out a piece of my personal stationery. They watched as he meticulously practiced my signature over and over, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was like a student cramming for an exam, an artist perfecting his craft. His craft was forgery. His art was betrayal. When he was finally satisfied, they watched him toss the practice sheets into the trash. They watched him pull out a thick stack of official legal documents. And with a calm, steady hand and a smug, triumphant smile on his face, they watched him sign my name, transferring ownership of my beach house, my car collection, my entire life's work to himself. The silence in the ballroom was no longer just quiet. It was a physical presence, a crushing weight. I could hear the sharp, horrified gasp of Mrs. Vance beside me. I glanced at Isabella. Her face was a mask of utter devastation. Her hand was pressed to her lips, her beautiful eyes wide with a pain so profound it was difficult to witness. She looked from the monstrous image on the screen to the man she was supposed to marry, her expression a silent scream of disbelief and heartbreak. And Marcus. He just stood there shaking his head slowly, his face the color of ash, as if he could somehow deny the irrefutable evidence of his own actions playing out for the world to see. I let the final image of his smiling, treacherous face linger on the screen for a full 10 seconds. Then I spoke again, my voice cutting through the silence like a surgeon's scalpel. "That is a recording from my office's private security camera," I announced. "A camera my son did not know existed." I let that sink in. I could see the guests turning to each other, whispering in shocked horror. The Vances looked like this was only the first cut. "But a video, as they say, can be deceiving," I said, a cruel irony in my voice. So I brought something else. I made my second call. "Play the audio recording," I commanded. Once again, the speakers crackled to life. But this time, there was no music. There was only my son's voice captured from a phone call he thought was private, a call with a so-called financial advisor who was actually one of Denise's investigators. His voice was not the charming, polished tone everyone in this room knew. This voice was cold, arrogant, and dripping with contempt. "Just let the old man think he's paying his medical bills." His voice echoed through the silent, horrified ballroom. "He's so out of it he'll sign anything I put in front of him. By the time he figures out the truth, it will be too late. The entire estate, everything he ever built, will be mine. He had his time. Now it's my turn." It was the undeniable proof of his intent, the raw, ugly truth of the darkness in his heart broadcast in his own words. That was what broke Isabella. A gut-wrenching sob tore from her throat. She stared at Marcus, her face a mess of tears and betrayal. "How could you?" She whispered a question that was lost in the ensuing chaos. She turned and fled the ballroom, her bridesmaids running after her. The spell was broken. The room erupted. Arthur Vance, whose face had gone from pale to a dangerous apoplectic red, finally exploded. He strode towards Marcus, his body trembling with a rage so immense I thought he might strike him. He stopped just short, his finger jabbing at the air inches from my son's face. "You are a parasite," he roared, his voice shaking the crystal chandeliers. "You entered my home, you sought to join my family, all based on a foundation of lies and dishonor. You are nothing." He pointed a trembling finger towards the exit. Get out of my house." "The engagement is off. If I ever see your face again, it will be too soon." Marcus stood alone in the center of the room, a desolate island in a sea of shocked and accusing faces. The confident king of just 10 minutes ago was gone, replaced by a trembling, broken man in a ridiculously expensive suit. His face was a ghastly shade of white, and his eyes, wide with terror, darted around the room as if searching for an escape route that did not exist. His entire world, his future, his carefully crafted identity had been publicly executed. He finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of disbelief and a dawning, horrifying comprehension. "Dad," he whispered the word, a pathetic croak. "Why?" The question was so naive, so utterly devoid of self-awareness, that a bitter, humorless laugh escaped my lips. The sound was harsh in the silent ballroom. "Why?" I repeated, my voice dripping with "You stand there exposed as a forger, a thief and a liar who would prey on his own dying father, and you ask me why?" I took a step forward, my voice dropping to a low, intense level, yet it carried to every corner of the room. "Because you underestimated me, Marcus. That's the real reason. You looked at me and you saw a weak old man, a relic from a bygone era, a sentimental fool who was easy to manipulate. You saw my love for you as a weakness to be exploited. You saw my trust as an open vault waiting to be plundered. You never once saw the man who taught you everything you know about ambition and strategy. You forgot that every lesson you ever learned about building a life you learned from me, and you never once considered that I might have a few lessons left to teach." I let my words hang in the air, each one a hammer blow against the fragile shell of his arrogance. I looked him straight in the eye, holding his gaze, refusing to let him look away from the wreckage he had created. "And you made one final, fatal mistake," I continued, my voice now deathly quiet. "A mistake born from the same arrogance that led you to this moment. You used Coastal Realty Group to sell my house. You were so proud of that, weren't you? Getting a top-tier firm to handle your dirty work. But did you ever stop to ask yourself why? Why would a major real estate powerhouse, a company that deals with international corporations, agree to work with a nobody like you, a man with no reputation and no history? I let the question linger, a final, unsolvable riddle. I could see the frantic calculations behind his eyes as he tried to make sense of it, tried to find a rational explanation that did not lead to the terrifying conclusion that was dawning on him. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion, the foundations giving way, the structure groaning before crumbling into dust. "Because it's mine, Marcus," I said, delivering the final devastating blow. "I founded Coastal Realty Group in 1985. It was the first company I ever built. Every employee, from the CEO in the corner office to the receptionist at the front desk, ultimately reports to me. Every document you filed, every call you made, every dollar you stole was logged, recorded, and delivered directly to my desk. You didn't just get caught in a lie, son. You walked right into the heart of my empire and confessed your crimes to my most loyal soldiers. You were never in control, not for a single second." That was it. That was the truth that finally broke him. It wasn't just that he had been caught. It was the realization that he had been so completely and utterly outplayed. His grand act of rebellion was nothing more than a fool's errand, a child playing checkers against a grandmaster. A strange guttural sound escaped his throat, a noise of pure despair. His legs gave out from under him and he crumpled to the marble floor in a heap of expensive tailoring and shattered pride. He knelt there, head bowed, his body shaking with silent, racking sobs. The king was dethroned, kneeling amidst the ruins of his own making. I looked down at the pathetic figure on the floor, the boy I had raised, the man who had tried to destroy me. For a fleeting second I felt a pang of something, a ghost of the love that used to be there. But then I remembered the smug smile on his face in the video, and the coldness returned. This was not a tragedy. This was justice. I pulled out my phone one last time, the third and final call. "Denise?" Exactly 2 minutes later, the grand ballroom doors swung open again. This time it was not a guest who entered. It was 2 uniformed officers of the Atlanta Police Department. They moved with a calm, professional purpose, their presence a stark, sobering reality in a room built on fantasy and illusion. The crowd parted for them silently, a mixture of fear and morbid fascination on their faces. The officers walked directly to the center of the room where Marcus was still kneeling. "Marcus Dubois," the taller officer said, his voice polite but firm. "You are under arrest for the crimes of felony fraud, forgery, and elder abuse." The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut echoed through the vast, silent room. It was a sound of finality, the sound of a door slamming shut on a life of privilege and deceit. As the officers pulled him to his feet, he looked up, his eyes searching. I watched him closely, searching for any sign of remorse, any flicker of regret, any hint of the son I once knew. There was nothing. His eyes, red-rimmed from his tears of self-pity, held no sorrow. They held only a burning, impotent hatred. It was the raw, undiluted rage of a predator who was sorry for only one thing. He was sorry he got caught. In that final, chilling moment, I knew I had done the right thing. The night of the engagement party was merely the beginning. The fallout was a media firestorm, a scandal so juicy and so public that it consumed the city of Atlanta for weeks. The story was irresistible, a modern-day Shakespearean tragedy played out amongst the city's most powerful families. Headlines screamed from the front pages of newspapers and gossip blogs alike. Real estate tycoon traps fraudster son in epic takedown. The Vance engagement implodes amidst betrayal and forgery. My face and my son's I was painted as everything from a ruthless strategic genius to a tragic, heartbroken father. They were both right. The Vance family, masters of self-preservation, acted with swift and surgical precision. Within 24 hours, their army of lawyers released a cold, formal statement to the press. They expressed their profound shock and disappointment, officially announced the annulment of the engagement, and offered their sincere sympathies to me for my ordeal. Then they vanished. They retreated to their summer home in the Hamptons, pulling up the drawbridge to their fortress of old money, leaving Marcus to face the consequences of the inferno he had created all by himself. He had been a valuable asset, but now he was a liability, and they cut him loose without a second thought. His entry into their world was officially and irrevocably revoked. For Marcus, there was no escape. The legal process was swift and brutal. With the undeniable video and audio evidence I had provided, the district attorney had an airtight case. There was a brief, highly publicized trial. I had to testify a painful experience where I recounted my son's betrayal under the cold fluorescent lights of a courtroom. I avoided looking at him. I saw him sitting at the defense table, not in a tailored suit, but in cheap, ill-fitting courthouse attire. He looked hollowed out, a ghost haunted by his own greed. He never took the stand. There was nothing he could say. The judge was unsparing. Marcus was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to a mandatory minimum of 4 years in a state correctional facility and was ordered to pay full restitution for every single dollar he had stolen. The gavel fell with a deafening crack, a sound of absolute finality. His reputation, his future, his life as he knew it was over. He was no longer Marcus Dubois, the promising young investor. He was now just an inmate number. In the months that followed, Denise and I worked tirelessly to undo the damage. It was a painstaking process of reclaiming what was mine. I got the titles back to my cars. I got the deed back to my beach house. The money was transferred from the accounts he had hidden it in and returned to my name. On paper, I was made whole again. I had won. I had gotten everything back: the house, the cars, the money, my honor. But as I stood alone in the living room of my reclaimed beach house, the sound of the ocean waves crashing on the shore outside, a profound sense of emptiness washed over me. The revenge had given me a purpose, a cold, clear mission that had consumed my every waking thought. Now, in the quiet aftermath, I was left with the ashes of my victory. Every room in this house echoed with memories, ghosts of a happier time. I could see a young Marcus building sandcastles on the beach. I could see the ghost of my wife Eleanor smiling as she watched us, her heart full of love for the family we had built. That family was now shattered. I had proven that I was not a weak old man. I had protected my legacy. I had served justice. But in doing so, I had lost my only son. I had sent my own flesh and blood to prison. The victory felt hollow, the spoils of war tainted by a grief that was deeper and more complex than I could have ever imagined. I had gotten everything back, but I was more alone than ever. Or so I thought. A full year passed. The storm of the scandal eventually subsided, replaced by the quiet, steady rhythm of my new life. I threw myself back into my work, not with the same relentless hunger of my youth, but with a renewed sense of purpose. I started a foundation in my late wife's name, building homes for families in need. I found a quiet satisfaction in the work, a peace that had eluded me. The rage that had fueled my revenge had cooled, leaving behind a permanent hollow ache in the place where a father's love for his son used to be. I did not speak of Marcus. I did not visit him. In my mind, he was gone. Then one Tuesday morning, a letter arrived. It was a simple, plain white envelope marked with the stamp of the Georgia State Correctional Facility. My heart, the one that doctors had so painstakingly repaired, gave a painful lurch in my chest. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was his. It was Marcus. I carried the letter into my office and sat at my desk for a long time just looking at it. I was afraid to open it. I was afraid of the excuses, the justifications, the pleas for pity I was sure I would find inside. Part of me wanted to throw it into the fire to burn this final ghost from my life, but another part, a deeper, more stubborn part, needed to know. With a deep breath, I sliced open the envelope. The letter inside was written on cheap lined paper. The words were not the confident scrawl of the son I knew, but the careful, deliberate script of a man with nothing but time to think. "Dad," it began, "I am writing this letter not to ask for your forgiveness. I know I have no right to that now or ever. I am writing because I finally understand. In here, there are no Tom Ford suits, no glasses of champagne, no fake praise from people who want something from you. There is only the truth. And the truth is, I became a monster. I let greed and arrogance eat away at my soul until there was nothing left of the boy you raised. I looked at you, my own father, and I didn't see the man who taught me how to throw a baseball in the backyard, the man who stayed up late reading me adventure stories until I fell asleep. I saw only numbers in a bank account. I saw an obstacle between me and the life I thought I deserved. I lost everything, and I now understand that losing it all was the only way I could ever hope to find myself. It is a just and right consequence for what I did. I spend my days working in the prison woodshop. It is hard, honest work. My hands are calloused, and for the first time in my life, I feel like I have earned my sleep at the end of the day. In the evenings, I am finally reading the books you always tried to get me to read, the ones about honor, integrity, and what it truly means to be a man. I know I can never change what I did. I can never undo the pain I caused you. But I needed you to know that I finally understand the lessons you tried to teach me all those years. I love you, Dad, and I am so sorry it took being locked in a cage for me to remember what honor means. I read the letter 3 times, the words blurring through a haze of tears I did not know I still had. Then I walked out onto my balcony and looked out at the Atlanta skyline. The anger was gone, washed away by a tentative, fragile wave of hope. Tomorrow I would write back to my son. I would tell him that love does not require perfection, but respect requires honor. True wealth is not measured by the assets you accumulate, but by the integrity you maintain. A foundation built on lies will inevitably crumble, but a legacy built on honor, even when rebuilt from ruins, can stand the test of time and betrayal.